All right, good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for this month's innovation webinar session. My name is Fernando and I come with the Region 9 Head Start Association, and I will be your webinar admin today. So feel free to contact me via the chat option of Zoom with any logistical questions you may have regarding audio, video, or connection issues. If you have not done so already, please take a look at a list of resources located on our website, which is www.region9hsa.org. You can also see it on the screen right now. You will find resources that were made available by our presenter today that will enhance your presentation experience today. This webinar session will be recorded and made available to all of you later this week. Please hold any comments or questions that you may have until the end of the presentation today. We will devote the last 5 minutes or so at the end for questions and discussion. At that time, you may use the Q&A option of Zoom or the chat, or click the raise your hand button, which will allow your microphone to be unmuted to speak directly to the entire room. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our topic for today, which is facility development, and our presenter today will be Kristen DeMara. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you, Fernando. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're having a good afternoon. I'm actually excited to share our experience with developing our new facility. I'm sure, as everybody knows, when they expanded for duration, we of course jumped on it and just wrapped up our facility opening. We just opened our new facility in February, actually February 7th. So this process is very fresh to us. You know, the beginning stages, the middle, the end, and now kind of seeing it to fruition and seeing the children and families experience the new facility is amazing. And so I'm excited to talk about it. So I'm mainly going to be talking about it from the perspective of opening up a new facility. It's a little different. I'm sure some of you guys have done the Early Head Start partnership grant where you renovated existing facilities. Obviously, because those are already existing facilities where we're partnering with somebody else to do the renovation, whereas this, we're able to do this on our own. So I'm excited to share it. So hopefully it'll give you a little bit of insight for wherever you guys are at in the process. So I just wanted to talk first about the purpose of kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So we'll look at the actual process for developing a new center. And expanding or renovating a current center. I'll just talk about my suggestions, our experience, kind of what worked, what was some saving graces for us, and how we looked at our design of our new facility. It's something to keep in mind before the entire process begins. And so just looking at that from the beginning. So like I said, I'm not sure where everybody's at with whether you have money, you're waiting for approval, or it's something you would like to do in the future. Maybe you have a site that is just run down and putting the money in to renovate, or the area is just not in the area that you need to stay in, or maybe you're leasing a space right now and they're not renewing your lease and you need to get into your own location. These are just some pre-funding considerations if you're at the process at the beginning. So really, you just need to decide what the best option for you is. When we were looking at it, whether we were going to buy a new facility or rent a facility, we looked at our area and what our options were. So when we actually went around looking, because we're in Reno and it's different for every city, and I'm sure, you know, people are hearing housing that Reno is crazy, and it has been for the last couple of years, but the majority of the spaces that were available for rent were in strip malls, and it wasn't really a conducive spot for a childcare center. And so we actually had to get a letter from a realtor stating that the current market in our area to open a childcare facility was not, leasing was not really an option, which is how we were able to actually purchase a facility. So you want to just look at those considerations when you're looking at that at the beginning. Just keep in mind that the process for requesting funds and approval back from the regional office to either purchase or renovate is a lengthy process. So our process took almost a year to actually get the building purchased from when we actually got the funds submitted. And so we had to put some alternate plans in place because we actually rented out the current locations that we had because we expanded with state pre-K. So those kiddos that were going to be in our new facility did not have a home for this last school, starting school. So we had to decide to do home base for those families, and it was a challenge. So that was a big challenge of ours because our families need services in classrooms. And so we really had to work with those families to keep them engaged, to wait. The biggest thing that we did to keep those families engaged was having regular meetings with them, showing pictures and progress of the facility so they were invested in the outcome, knowing that it was going to finish. And so really engaging those families and letting them know in communication with them on where you're at, just because we did lose some families because they couldn't wait. So also, if, like I said, you're at the beginning phases or you're thinking about it, when you're putting together your startup budget, what I would suggest, because I could have done better at this, was really looking at the cost rates. So purchasing a new facility, obviously you're going to be looking at price per square footage, how much square footage you need in the building based on how many children and the other spaces in the classroom. But because sometimes it takes a year to get all that stuff approved, the cost could go up or down, but you're wanting to remember that if the cost goes up, you need to make considerations for that. So if you get funded in September of a certain year, this year, and you can't spend your funds until next May, there could be an increase in cost for purchasing a facility, which is a huge impact to your budget, because obviously the biggest price to opening the facility is the actual purchase of the facility. So just keep that in mind and cushion it so you do not run into not having enough money when it actually comes to purchase the facility. Again, because the purchase was over a year, about a year process, consider the market value, like I said, and then I would look at the area in which you're wanting to build. So of course, like Reno, like any other place, if I wanted to go in certain areas, the price is going to be higher, but you're going to look in the areas that is where your families, the need is for your family. So what place you want to build and the price in that area, and then consider higher rates due to the length of time that you are going to actually purchase the facility. So when you go through the whole process, you submit your application, your narrative, your budgets, approval through PC, all that fun stuff, and everything's approved, and you're actually identifying your location at this point, I would recommend getting a realtor. Obviously, we know that you can purchase facilities without a realtor, but realtors, like our realtor, knew some spaces that were available that we would not necessarily know about unless we went through a realtor company, real estate company. So I would for sure recommend a realtor. Obviously, once you start looking at the location, you're going to identify a possible location, just because obviously the paperwork that you submit, actually once you purchase, you're going to actually have to have some things about the facility that you're submitting. So you're going to want to actually pin down the actual facility that you're looking at. When you're looking at a location, you're going to want to make sure you research zoning. There are certain areas, even if it's a already business area, that will not allow childcare centers in that area. Just as you know, it's a different type of business, children being outside, the noise around the surrounding area is different. We came into a situation where we had to get a special use permit in another facility that we were doing. And so those are all things to consider, because you, of course, do not want to purchase a facility, then go to submit building permits, and they don't allow you to have it in that area. So definitely research the zoning and ensure that you're able to put an actual childcare center in that area. Ensure that the space is the size that you need it. So, you know, sometimes when we're looking in our mind, we think, okay, we need so many square footage for the child. But then we sometimes forget, okay, that's minus hallways, minus any fixed fixtures and classrooms that take away from the square footage, common areas for staffing, lounge areas, conference rooms, adult bathrooms, office space, all that common area space that we sometimes forget about. Make sure that you have an adequate size. You would rather have a little bit bigger space than not enough space, because then it's not a real functioning facility. So definitely look at space and remember both the common and classroom space areas. Ensure that the outdoor space is appropriate. We actually renovated a bank building, and so it definitely was not anything to do with childcare prior. The space that we actually renovated for the playground was where the teller drive-through, and so I had to make sure that our land was big enough to put our square footage for our outdoor space had to be 3,000 square feet. We had 80 kids. Well, we have 80 kids. So just making sure you have adequate and appropriate outdoor space and ability to fence and do all the things that you need to do to make that space conducive for the children. I would recommend working with licensing ahead of time. So I actually, just because I'm sure most of you have a good working relationship with your licensing person, I had her come out to the site before we purchased it just to tell me anything that I wasn't thinking about. So I had her look at the space, measure it, tell me what I'm missing, look at the outdoor space, look at all these spaces in here. What do you think? Is this going to work? Look at the doors, look at the exits existing. And so I had her actually come out to give the kind of thumbs up before, because obviously licensing is an issue, and if licensing has some sort of issue with it, you want to look at that ahead of time versus dealing with that later. Do your due diligence. This should be for all, but when you're purchasing a facility, especially when it's an older facility, ours was it was a little over 30 years old. So we were able to go in before the purchase and do the mold and asbestos samples. We did have some asbestos positive, and so those were in some of the areas that we were going to renovate. And so knowing ahead of time the areas, because asbestos abatement, I'm sure, as if any of you have done it, is a huge expense. And so that is an impact to your budget. And so it's something that you want to consider ahead of time, just so you know that that is going to be affect your budget if that's something that you need to do. So when you're looking at all of that and looking at the design, the best money I'm going to say I spent, of course, besides purchasing the facility, was hiring a knowledgeable and skilled architect or architect firm. So the reason why I put don't cut corners on this, when I had my experience with the development of the Early Head Start Partnership Grants, I did not do, I don't think, enough research on architects and their background and what their previous experience was in doing schools or anything to that nature. I was trying to get bids as quickly as possible. So the architect that we selected for the Early Head Start Partnership Grants was very limited in what they helped us with. So they basically did the job, they did the actual design work, but when you hire a skilled and a higher quality architect, they will help you so much more through the process, and they almost become your partner in the full design. So it's more expensive, and and I actually got a quote from the same architectural firm that did the first one, and the one I actually picked, it was a $45,000 difference, but it was worth every penny that we spent. So put the money into this because it'll make your life 100% easier, just because I did have the two experiences. So the architectural firm that we work with and the architect that I actually work with personally, they obviously do the design and outline of the classrooms and the facility plan for submittal prior to purchase. They actually worked with me to put together a timeline, which is part of your submittal process as well. You have to put in a projected timeline, and because they've done so many construction projects, they do a very good estimate of what that looks like. They work closely and partner with your contractor to make sure that everything's moving on track. So it's not just you doing it on your own. You have an expert person working with you to make sure that they are doing what the submittal says that they're supposed to be doing, what the plans say that they're going to be doing. And then, of course, they ensure and do all the research on the building. And if it's older, of course, making sure that things are brought up to code. And so that's super important as well. So definitely spend the money on a very good, high quality architect. And the architect that we actually hired has done, not actually a preschool, but they've done schools, like elementary schools. So they at least have some sort of idea of classroom planning. When you're looking at the design at the beginning, you basically are going to want to think of everything you want in this facility and get it down. You can always downsize later, but you're going to want to put everything that you want in there because that is what's going to go out to bid, and that is what you're paying for, obviously. So pay attention to everything. So you're going to want to make sure you tell them everything. So like I went in there and said, okay, I don't want the cheapest floor. There's going to be 20 kids on this floor a day. There's going to be spills. There's going to be this. There's going to be that. I don't want to have to be replacing floors in, a couple years. I want higher quality floors. You want to do lighting, plumbing, fencing, all this stuff that you would have to do separately on your own. Try to get as much possible into your actual contract work because then they take care of it for you. So our contractor in the bid, they did our fencing for us. They did the outdoor painting as well. They did all the outdoor landscape, cutting down trees that we had to do, all that stuff that we needed to get the actual facility put together. They're the ones that bid out the carpentry work for all the cabinetry that we did in all of our classrooms and any storage spaces, the asphalt and parking, obviously your HVAC, your finishes. I mean, everything you want as much as possible, you're going to want to put into detail into the actual drawings with your architect. And that way, like I said, your contractor takes care of most of that. So then you don't have to do separate bids for the fence on your own, things like that. So once you're ready to start the bid process, you've worked with your architect to put all the final plans in place. You have the rooms, how you want it to look. You have the back space, how you want it to look, all the different elements, concrete versus turf versus sand areas, all that fun stuff. Obviously, if you're in a smaller community, you don't have 15 licensed contractors. That's not, it will be different if you're in a smaller community. Reno's, average. We're not super huge, but we're not rural. So I recommend sending it out to at least 15 licensed contractors. That's what we did. And the crazy part about that is just maybe it's our community, but we are building like crazy in Reno. But we put out 15 bids for this project, and we actually only got one back. So I can't imagine if I put in 5, if I would have gotten any back. So, and the actual contractor that worked with us, we have worked with in the past, so they know our processes and love working with us. But all the other ones, like I said, they're so busy right now in Reno that, I needed to at least get it out to people to see if they were able to do it. You're going to want to ensure that all the documents are sent to the contractors. As you know, they need to be in compliance with all the federal guidelines. And so it's just nice to give that ahead of time. And so that way you're not sending just the plans to bid. And then once they come back, you say, oh, by the way, we have to follow this. I need timesheets. I need this from you. They have to be bonded. They have to, all these things that have to be done. It's nice for them to know ahead of time. It's a big packet, I'm sure, as you guys know, but it's helpful so that they know all the requirements that they're supposed to do on their end. So also give adequate time for the contractors to coordinate with the subcontractors and get the bids returned. I'm sure, as you guys know, once you get an actual contractor, they'll come in with all of their subcontractors. So their lighting guys, their plumbing guys, they have to put their bids together, give it to the contractor, and then the contractor puts their fees and their work on top of that to get the final numbers. So just giving it enough time so that way they can put together a bid that is the value of what you're getting. So we want to make sure they have enough time to do that. So once you select a contractor, and hopefully you guys get or have gotten more bids back than just one, because then you can compare to see, okay, this one's supervision fee is a lot higher, this one's less, but this one added the shed in the drawings, this one didn't. You can kind of see what they took from those drawings and compare. And I actually looked with my architect to make sure that they had put in everything that he had submitted into our proposal. So that way nothing was missed. Yeah, so once the contract is selected, they will work with the architect to finalize plans. So the architect brings your plans up to 90% done, but, well, I'd say 85% done. Once you submit once you select your contractor, they will finalize any last lighting selections, plumbing information. They actually finalize that on their end and communicate with the contract or communicate with the architect all of those details, so that way the architect could update it so we all have the same information. So once you're actually ready for construction, just know that things will not go as planned. You have either gone through this, you're about to go through it, or you have a personal experience in your home if you've ever remodeled or designed a house. Construction never goes as planned. So just expect that and be prepared for it, so that way you don't get too upset when timelines are moved and things of that nature. So I would say at first, expect the permit process to take some time. So for us, when we submitted our initial permits to the city for approval so we can start the construction process, they came back to us with a couple things they wanted us to change and add to meet building code. And so because we had to make some changes, that process that we thought was originally going to be a week and a half was about a 3-week process, because we had to do some resubmittals of the plans. So give that enough time to know that you probably will have to make some changes based on requirements. What we did, which was really helpful for me also, was we did weekly meetings, and we didn't do them at our main Head Start location, the contractor's office, the architect's office. We actually did them on site, so that way we could be there once a week to look at the job. Obviously, your contractors are there daily, but it's a chance for you to go and see the process. I was able to take photos of it, see where we're at. There were times where I would go in, so thank goodness we were doing weekly meetings. For example, when I selected the paint, they were only supposed to paint one accent wall in each classroom. And when I went into the site inspection that week, they had painted the entire classroom the color. And so I walked into one classroom and the entire classroom was orange, and I almost fainted because it was very overwhelming. And so it's good to catch that because they had only done 2 rooms, and so it prevented them from doing the other 2 rooms. So things like that, you get to see what's actually going on. And then the architect's there to actually do some inspections and walk around as well. It's a time to review the timelines. So your contractor should be giving you updated timelines on a regular basis as things move and change. Like for us, for example, when we started construction, about a couple days into it, when they were ripping up the floors, underneath an area of carpet that we thought was just carpet, there was actual tile flooring under that. Well, it was an area that we did not test for asbestos because we did not know that there was tile underneath it. So we had to kind of do a testing, and it came back positive. So we had to stop construction for 5 days because we had to do abatement in about 2,500 square feet of the area. That was an additional to the couple 100 square feet that we already had to do. So that set us back a week. And so the timelines are going to change based on things that come up. And again, like I said, some things will come up. But the good news is that if you hire a good contractor, they will be able to do other things. So when we had to be out of the building for a week, that's when they switched gears and they started work on the outside. And so, like I said, if you hire a good contractor, they will be able to kind of work on other things if other things arise. So change orders, expect this. It's something that you're going to want to expect in your budget. That abatement, the additional abatement that we had to do was an extra $30,000 change order. We also, and all this stuff, it's crazy. I have no idea when we were doing it, but we needed an additional backflow once we got in there. We needed to add an ADA ramp, which was something later after we got in there after an inspection. We had to upgrade the fire corridor halls, so that was an extra change order. So we had about 150,000 over in change orders. So that's why I'm saying make sure when you're doing your budgets that you overestimate, because there's going to be stuff in construction that you're not going to know of ahead of time, and nobody knows that stuff ahead of time. Sorry. We talked about this, so just delays in timeline of construction work, either due to, it could be weather if they're working outside. We have snow here in Reno. If you're in a sunny place and it never snows, I am so jealous. But we had some weather delays in our outside space because we did get some snow during the process. And just a number of any other issues. So the main thing is just be prepared, be flexible. We didn't give parents a solid timeline from the beginning. We gave them, even when we determined from our contractor and architect a timeline, we estimated about 4 to 6 weeks after that, and then told them we would let them know on a regular basis when the timeline shifted and moved. So again, just knowing that that's going to happen, and just being flexible and communicating with families so that way they know what's going on. So communication, I mean, I was in contact with the contractors and architects regularly. Like, I got Christmas gifts. They're on my friends list now. It's crazy. So communication with the architect and the contractor is key. And when you build those relationships, and our contractor at the end, when we were getting a bunch of work orders and I knew our budget was getting tight, because we worked so closely together and they kind of knew us, they waived some of their supervision fees on certain things. So it was nice that we were able to do that, which was able to kind of cut our budget a little bit. So having that good working relationship and being in constant communication can help, because like I said, we did get some costs cut on their end, just because they knew that we had some unexpected change orders that came up and that we were on a restricted budget. So on this, the other thing that you're just going to want to make sure, I'm sure, you know, all the directors or managers on here, executive directors or whoever's on here, that you also have your other job you're still doing. You're still either managing your programs and doing all that stuff. And so it's easy to, you know, drop balls when you have so much going on. But just when you're in construction, and the timelines are evolving, you're going to make sure that you plan ahead for some things. So for example, for our very final inspection to get our certificate of occupancy, we could not have any classroom materials, any office materials in the actual site. They had to do a dry inspection of just everything that was in there for construction. I could not have anything additional. But I had already worked with our vendor for the materials. So all the materials were ordered, the purchase order was ready to go, or already submitted. They were holding their stuff at their location. And once I got the information from the contractor on when that final inspection was going to be, I had them deliver the materials. I gave a 2-day window just in case there was anything they had to correct. So I gave a 2-day window and had it scheduled ahead of time. And that way I didn't have to wait until I actually got the approval, then went to my vendors and said, okay, now let's schedule something. So I had that ahead of time. So I just, you know, you can plan ahead on some of that stuff, even with revolving timelines. You just have to make sure that you're just on top of all that. Of course, in order to get the health inspection, you have to have your kitchen equipment, but you can't have your kitchen equipment until they do the kitchen inspection. And so it's just all that stuff. So just having that all ready, we're lucky that, you know, we're still kind of a small community and we do business with obviously a lot of people. And so they were able to house all this stuff until we had the go ahead. So this just enables you to get all the equipment to your facility in the quickest time possible, and it doesn't delay any inspections or doesn't delay anything from moving forward. So there never should be a time where there's no motion, because there's always constantly stuff that could be done, especially if you plan ahead of time. So when you're wrapping it up and all this construction is complete, you've done all your inspections, you've done all your ordering, everything's in there, and the final inspection is done. Obviously after that, then comes your local licensing inspection, and that's different for every county, so whatever that looks like for you. I was able to coordinate those ahead of time as well, and so once I knew when the furniture and everything was going to be delivered, I gave our staff and our team, you know, a few days to get those classrooms put together, all the emergency stuff put up, all the lesson plans, the daily schedule, all the things that they need to get up in that classroom for your inspections. So making sure you give the staff enough time to do that so that they feel that their room is ready for kids to start in there. We did this, and I think it was actually really helpful for our families so they can see it and knew that there was a start date, as we did an open house for our families prior to opening. We actually invited community members, board members, all that stuff, because of course we had been talking about this for a year. But it was super helpful, and families were very excited. The kids got to see their classrooms ahead of time, you know, because the staff had been talking to them about it the entire time. So it was a very, I think, helpful process for the children and families. And then finally, you are ready to open up for the children and the families. And like I said, we did that on February 7th. So we've just been in operation of our new facility for a little over a month. We actually submitted for 2 classrooms, but because I was able to get into a facility at a little lower rate, they actually gave us some funds back. We worked with them on like a tax thing. We were able to open a 4 classroom. So that was exciting. Oh, sorry, that graphic threw me off a little bit. A is for Apple. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the environment, because of course, creating your environment, I think, is Obviously, very important. You guys know that the environment helps create the space for the children, which helps create effective learning. It helps, you know, all of that stuff. And so just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the space and keeping that in mind when you are looking and talking about flooring and lighting and all that stuff, because as you know, it does affect children's behaviors, and you know, that affects quality environments. So just things for consideration. So obviously you know the age of the children, but obviously that's something to consider. You might be doing early Head Start and Head Start in the facility. So you're gonna wanna make sure that your classrooms are spaces for, you know, the various age ranges of your children, and that there's spaces for infant toddlers, there's spaces for preschool. Obviously, if it's just infant toddler, that's different. If it's just for preschool, that's different. But obviously, age of your children, you want to consider when looking at the space, which of course affects square footage and ratio and all that fun stuff. The space for the children. So I think most of you know that, because I have seen this, actually was one of our early Head Start partnerships wanted to do this. She wanted to do some pony walls and kind of have the kids still be able to see each other. I think you guys know that we're not able to do that. You have to have full walls or full partitions in the classrooms for lots of reasons. I mean, sound, lots of different reasons, but just making sure those spaces for the children meet all the requirements. We made sure that we had windows into the hallways to look in the classrooms, so that you know, for supervision as well, and so parents can kind of observe their children through those windows, which is always a comforting feeling, especially those kids. We had been doing home base, and some of those kids hadn't been in school before, so just considering all that when you're doing that. Space for staff. So obviously it's a place for kids to go, to feel comfortable, for them to have a pleasant environment, for them to, you know, get all the learning experiences they can out of the space. It is also a space for staff. So you're going to want to keep that in mind when you're doing it, and not provide that space for them. And so we have like a lounge area for staff. That of course could have been 1,000 other things, but wanted to make sure that they had that area to go and put their personal belongings, and lounge and eat and all that good stuff. You know, separate conference room spaces for meetings and meetings with families, and so they're not squeezed in the offices. So really thinking about the space that you have, so it, like I said, it is a functioning space. Because sometimes what happens, and we all have it, I mean, most of our sites are modulars, at least our experience, and our modulars have 2 classrooms, 2 offices, a kitchen, and that's it. There's no meeting spaces for families. There's no big chairs for staff except for in the offices. There's no conference room meeting spaces. And so those spaces are not the best environment for everybody. And so when you're building your own, you want to make sure you provide those spaces too. So it's a nice environment for everybody who comes into that space, and for the families, obviously. They can go in those lounge areas. They can, you know, those spaces they can also utilize as well. Health and safety, obviously this is kind of a no-brainer, but one, you're going to want to make sure, obviously the areas that we serve are in low-income areas, but you're going to want to make sure that it is in a space that's not near obvious hazards or high traffic areas, things like that. So keeping that in mind when you're looking at your space. Obviously we put in money for safety, so in the startup funds, we did security cameras. So I would definitely do that ahead of time, so you don't have to go and do that later. So security cameras, we did the locking doors, so that way, you know, parents and staff have to enter with a key card. There's only one point of entrance. We made sure the other doors are locked, all that good stuff. So having that security, those health and security measures built in ahead of time, and so that way you have a secure facility that's safe for your families. The space is conducive to all the children and the families. People want to go there, and it's just a pleasant place to be. Other things to consider for your space is storage, which was a huge issue for us as well. In our modulars, we do not have enough storage. We have small closets, and so we had to, you know, buy shelves from Lowe's and stick them on the wall, and, you know, things don't match, and it's just, space is essential, as you know. Teachers need to rotate materials out, and they need space for their belongings and all that stuff. So make sure that you build in enough space for that. What we did was we did built-in cabinetry, and so we did all of the cabinetry high so that teachers have access to it, but the children obviously couldn't reach it, but there was space under it, so you can still put shelves under there. You can still put your block area under there. So having those spaces up, so you can still utilize the space that's at children's level for the room, and arranging the room so it doesn't take away from your space. So that's what we did. Your approach and access. So this is really just about, we have a lot of families. We don't provide transportation. Some other Head Start programs I know do that, so we do not. So we needed to make sure that it was close to busing, because we do have a lot of families that take public transportation, and so we want to make sure that our facilities are accessible to our families. So close to public transportation. Parking is always an issue. There's never enough parking, so making sure that there is ample parking, because you don't want to get into that parking wars between families, because that is never fun. That is accessible to children and families with disabilities, so making sure you do have the ramps and that your hallways are open enough, and just like I said, it's inviting for everybody has access to your space. The outdoor play area, I mean, obviously we all know this, but just making sure that it is just as inviting and pleasant as your indoor space, that your outdoor play area really should be an extension of your indoor space. And so just thinking about that, you know, that you have consideration for the elements. If, like, we are in a we just had a big snowstorm last weekend, and I still have snow in my yard. So just making sure, if you know you have elements, that you have accommodations. We were kind of lucky because we did have the bank, the teller drive-through, so we had a huge shade thing that we had over. So if it snows and kids don't want to go outside and don't want to get snowed on or rained on, they have a whole big space where they can play under that, where they're not touched by the rain. And so that was nice that we were able to do that. So yeah, just making that, sheds, all that different elements, so turf or grass, concrete for, you know, other types of play, sand, water, all that stuff. So making sure kind of all those elements are back there for the children to experience an extension of learning to your outdoor area. Use of color. This is actually super important to me. I'm sure all of you know that color does affect cognitive development in children, and depending on the color that you choose in your classrooms, it can impact, it can either calm children or excite children. And so we kind of did the natural colors in the classroom, and I'm gonna show you some photos of our actual facility here in a minute. But you're really gonna want to be cognizant of that when you are picking paint. And like I said in a previous thing, that we did an accent wall of a color. So I do think it's important not to have just white for kids. Outdoor has lots of colors. There's greens on trees, and there's the sun, and there's flowers. And so I do believe in use of color, but just really being careful on how you utilize colors, how much color you put in there, and what colors you actually do put in there. And there's, as you know, all types of research on different colors and how they affect children and what the best colors are for the age range of the children. So just a little separate thing. So think outside the box, like I said in the earlier slide. Put everything you want, and you know, obviously if it's over your budget, you'll need to downsize a little bit. But we had some unusable space for classrooms. Because we converted a bank, we had a vault, which I love. It's actually super unique. We have this huge vault. We kept the vault door. Of course, we had to take off the locking system, so no children or teachers can get locked in the vault. But what we did for that unusable space, because it was still a big space, is we are partnering with our with a play therapist, a mental health professional in town that we partner with already that does play therapist with some of our families, and they have interns that come into our classrooms. But we set up an actual play therapy office, a play therapy area in one part of the vault, and so that way they're able to actually do services for the children on site so that they don't actually have to go to their office. And we've opened it up for them to have community families in there as well. So it's also a way to get the community learning about Head Start and what we have to offer. And so it's a nice partnership that we have, and that's just a photo of the area that's set up for the actual play therapist. We also have on one side as well, like a little health center. So we're able to do health clinics in there, physical clinics, shot clinics, all those requirements in there. So that's right on site also. So we were able to use the vault for that space. And then because the vault was so big, there's a separate area as well that was separated by a door. That is our conference room area too. So we have a nice big space for staff meetings, conferences with families, all that good stuff in there. So we were able to still utilize the entire space in there. We just had to get creative, and it actually opened it up for some nice partnerships, which is nice. So just like I said, if you want it, imagine it, and go for it. That's what I would recommend, because it's worth it. So this is so what's going to happen is you'll see some initial construction, and then over it will be a photo of the finish. So I think this is the hallway. This is the hallway? Yes. So this is construction during the process. I got daily reports from construction. They sent me photos every day. That was awesome. And then you see that area, that's the finished product. So this is just the hall, nothing crazy. But it's nice to see kind of where it began and where it ended. You'll see some of the flooring that we picked for the hallways. Of course, just white in the hallways, so nothing too crazy, but you just saw the before and after pictures of that space. This is the outdoor space, so you'll see them doing construction. They had to rip up all of the drive-through area. You'll see the big shaded area. Obviously, that was for the teller, but that's our shaded area. That's our turf they were putting in, some concrete that they were doing. And then, so the fencing, and then that is an angle of kind of our play structure. Some of the bikes and a little shelf for some of the outdoor toys in there. And you'll see at the very corner, that's the drive-up windows that we kept in, which I love, up there. So it's kind of cool that you can still kind of see some of the bank elements in it, which is awesome. Which one's this? Sorry. Oh, these are our classrooms. So these are kind of the skeleton, walls are up, some cut-in windows, flooring, some paint. So here's one of our classrooms. So you can see, so every single classroom has some natural light. That was important. I think if none of the if there's areas that don't have natural lighting, they do talk about really being particular about the lighting you do put in there if there's no natural light. This one is, I think, the least natural light we have. We have one classroom that has entire walls natural light, which is amazing. So we just, no, that's okay. So we just did one accent color on each wall just to give it some light. We did a light yellow in one, a light green, a light blue, and an orange color, all kind of natural colors, and then kind of picked carpet colors, circle time carpets, accent carpets in the room based on that. So there's kind of like a theme. I didn't want each classroom to be the same color, the same rug, the same. So each classroom has its own feel in there because the colors are a little different, and it brings a different look to each one. And then because it wasn't a traditional anything before, it was a bank, you can't really tell, but the angle of this classroom is totally different than the others. Some are square. This one cuts in a little bit. You can't really tell at the end. There's soft space or there's safe space at the end with that little, I don't know, that little canopy at the end. But those are all the built-in cabinets on top. We did do one big one, so that way they had kind of a big space for that. But yeah, you'll see each classroom, and that has, you know, a whole side, that whole window of natural light over there. So this is the one that has that entire wall is all windows, which this is one of my favorite classrooms too. We did a light blue at the end where that tree is. Like I said, the colors kind of just go with the colors on the wall. Again, the built-in cabinetry, all that fun stuff. We did not, the only thing that I wish I could have done, which I'm sure, as you know, is a lot easier, is we were unable to put bathrooms in all the classrooms, so we have separate bathroom facilities for the kids. That, of course, is ideal to put bathrooms in one. This only had two bathroom areas. This is for a bank. So in order to put in plumbing in all of these classrooms to do plumbing lines, it was like an additional like $75. Like, it's expensive. And two, when you put in bathrooms in the classroom, it takes away from the square footage, and so I wouldn't have been able to do some of the other things in here if I took away. So I couldn't do that. So obviously, if you can, you're going to want to put bathrooms in your classrooms. That way the kids can just go right there. But I mean, it works out. So it's all fine. But of course, I would definitely put bathrooms in there. That's our last classroom. It's the orange room. I call them by colors, the orange, yellow, green, and blue room. Like I said, it's just one little thing, but it changes the whole look of the room. It's hard to tell here. The carpet is has a little bit of orange in it, and the rugs are like a cobblestone, and so it really brings out the feel in that room. This is like day one before we opened, and so there's not really any children's art or anything around the room to make it look more kid-oriented as far as their work, because we didn't have children yet. But of course now there's kids' photos and other things around. So that is our orange room. Awesome. So that was kind of a wrap of kind of the process that we took from beginning to the bid, to architect, to construction, to inspections, to how we looked at the design for the facility, you know, purposeful in what you're ordering for the classrooms, the colors, all of that affects the environment so much. And so really taking the time to get what you want in there and what is the most quality for the kids in there. So this is just a little quote. You know, the center environment should be comfortable and nurturing and allow adults to care for children in settings designed primarily for use by children. So as you guys know, an environment that's set up for kids to be able to explore and learn in a quality environment with staff as their kind of facilitators is the best environment. So I actually used as a resource for this, I would suggest it to anybody if they haven't, the Head Start Design Guide, if you're doing facilities now or building now or in the future. It's like 200 pages. It's crazy, but they have tons of information on picking spaces, lighting, color, all that stuff. Some of the requirements for through the performance standards on building and facilities. So I would highly recommend, if you're in the process, using the Head Start Design Guide for your facility renovation. So I want to thank everybody. I ramble, like I said, we just went through this process, so it's like right in my head. Every day was this, so I probably just rambled on. So if you have any questions, I think we're going to open it up for questions. And my email is on there in case you want to email me separately a question about something specific. And then there's the Region 9 Head Start Association website as well on there.
Thank you, Kristen, for the wonderful presentation. At this point, I'd like to open up the room, as she mentioned, for questions, comments, and discussions. You may now use the Q&A option if you desire so. You can also send us a chat message or simply click the raise your hand button so we can unmute your microphone so you can speak directly to Kristen. We do have a comment in our chat box which says, could you share a little bit more why you selected this particular location, Kristen? And it's also asking, was this area in high needs of Head Start, early Head Start?
So we picked it for a lot of different reasons. One, it was in the area of need of our families. It is very close to the bus stop, the freeway, very close to public transportation. There are a lot of surrounding pockets of homes in the area, and so even if the family didn't do busing, that they could walk to the facility. Again, we do have weather where sometimes obviously families don't want to walk in snowstorms, but for the most part, they're able to walk if they needed to. It was in the area of zoning, so it was just a regular business, and we had to change it from a B business license to a C for childcare, and we had to go down to zoning and ensure that that met the criteria, and it did. So it was we were able to actually put a childcare center, and there's no childcare center in that area now. There's we're right across from the post office. We're next door to like a Wells Fargo call center. We're across the street from a storage unit, so there is no childcare center there. It fit our budget, one, so it was in the price range that we were able to do, and was the size that we needed for the amount of kids that we wanted to put in there. So we had to look at all of that when we were selecting that, and it checked off every single box. So you're going to want to make sure you have your checklist and say, okay, this facility is the square footage, it's in an area of need, it's next to public transportation, it's zoned for childcare. So you're going to want to make sure you check your boxes, because if one is unchecked, that could prevent you from building in that area. So you're going to want to make sure you check all those boxes before you pull the trigger on purchasing that facility. Because if they don't check the boxes, you just need to go back to another location. So plan B. And of course, we did have plan B. We had another location that was my second choice, but I'm really glad our first choice worked out. But we did have a plan B.
Excellent.
Can I answer that? Okay.
Yes, thank you. I don't see any more questions, so I'd like to remind everybody that a recording of the webinar will be available on our webpage, which is displayed on the screen right now, later this week. Also, for more facility development center content, visit our website, and please take time to click on our voice and read an article about the importance of early childhood environments, written by Tiffany Alston, from the Nevada Head Start Association and Region 9 board member. Also, you will find upcoming events there, such as our 2018 STEM Institute, which this year's theme is Children as Adventurers, Outdoor Play. It seems that we received another question via our chat box, so I will go ahead and read that. Stephen is mentioning, I'm new to Head Start. I'm a facility manager. We're in need of a new facility in one of our counties. So you applied first before finding a location. How did you come up with costs for the application?
So yes, we applied first. We had to do a narrative on, why we were requesting the funds, why we were requesting the amount that we did. How I actually did the budget was I went online, actually worked with my realtor too, and looked at the square footage cost per square foot in the areas that we were looking at. So, and I'm making this up because it's totally different now. So if it was $1.25 a square foot, I needed so many square feet for the amount of children that I wanted to serve. Plus I had to add in square footage for all those common spaces. So that's, you want to make sure you know exactly what you want to put in there, because you need to make sure you have the space for it. So I needed to make sure, we had enough space for bathrooms and all that. So once I calculated how much square feet I needed, I then times that by the like $1.25, but then I estimated a jump. So I think I put it up to $2, times that by a little bit more room that I needed, and then did the rest of the budget. So when you're doing startup, you put in every single thing that you want to buy for that facility. The architect costs, the office furniture, your furniture for the children, your shed, your shade structure, your playground equipment, your computers, your iPads for the classrooms, every single thing that you, the refrigerator, all that sort of stuff. You're going to want to put all of that in the startup. Fencing. So we just did a budget, and of course you were going to want to overestimate. We had some initial costs because we've done fencing and we've done sheds and all that, but this space was a bigger space than our typical playgrounds because our modulars usually hold 2 classrooms and this one had 4. So we had to, double numbers and then expect for some inflation just in case costs went up when we actually went to build. And so that's kind of how we did the initial budget, is putting in the cost for the actual facility. And then the construction costs are a little bit more difficult to anticipate. So what we were able to do is we had just gotten done the year before doing the early Head Start partnership sites. And so we had an idea of what costs were at that point. And so I actually met with the contractor that we had already worked with. I had him come look at the site ahead of time. Not site ahead of time. I gave him a square footage number, told him the numbers of classrooms. He gave me a ballpark estimate of what he thought construction would be, and just ballpark, and I fluffed that. I added more knowing that there was going to be change orders to that. So it is difficult to do the initial startup budget, but ask for more because it's always going to be more expensive than you initially thought.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any more questions? Feel free to use the chat option of Zoom or the Q&A or raise your hand. Again, our website will contain all of this information that Kristen shared with us, and also a webinar recording, which will be available later this week. If there are no more questions, I'd like to thank everybody for attending this month's innovation session. You may find the upcoming topics on our webpage, the dates and time, as well as a registration link to make sure that you get a spot for the next one. I also want to thank our presenter today, Kristen DeMara, for her time and knowledge. If you have any questions, feel free to contact her at that email address on screen or at the association through the region9hsa.org website. Thank you again, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.